Finding the midpoint of a line segment, or really the midpoint of anything, is by definition finding the middle of something. So we're cutting a line in half. So if I have a line segment from here to here, and I want to find the midpoint, let's call it right there, M, that would mean that this side and this side have to be the exact same length. They have to be divided into two equal segments. Now that's super important, and we're going to do that in both X and Y direction. So if I'm finding the midpoint of something like this, what I need to look at is I want to find out how far it's gone left and right and how far it's gone up and down. Well, I know that we've moved over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes here. So the midpoint would be right there. So my midpoint in my X direction is going to be 4. Going Y, I know that I've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes. So I'm going to count up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and my midpoint would be right here. So the midpoint of this line would be where those two values intersect, which is going to be right there, and we're going to find that to be 4, 6. So finding the midpoint, you can do it graphically and actually draw it out and count. Sometimes, depending on your numbers, you might be between boxes, but typically this is a good way to find it. The only issue is, what if we run into numbers that are very complex? Well, the midpoint then is just going to be the average of two numbers. So if I'm looking at my midpoint in total, so if I find my midpoint of two lines, I'm going to deal with my x's. It's going to be x1 plus x2, and I'm going to just divide it in half. I'm going to find the average of those two numbers. That's going to be halfway between them. I'm going to do the same thing with my y values. y1 plus y2, and divide that in half. Now I can find my midpoint. I know my midpoint is going to be halfway between x, the average of my two x's, and halfway between y, the average of my two y's. So if we look at that same question from number 1, if we're going through this, our average, our midpoint of AB is going to be 1 plus 7 divided by 2, and 2 plus 10 divided by 2. Well, then that means my midpoint of AB is going to be 8 over 2, which is 4, and 12 over 2, which is 6. The exact same thing we found in the first values. What if we're given something different? Here, we're given a circle has a center of 5, 4. So we're going to say that this is 5, 4. Okay, I know that that looks like the origin. All I'm doing is I'm going to draw the circle around it. We've got these values, so we've got 5, 4. But now on one side, we've got -1 and 2. So let's say that that's down here. We've got -1 and 2. And it's asking us, what's the other endpoint? What's this value over here? Well, what we have to do is we have to consider that we're using that formula, but we're going to break it up into x and y because we want to have both parts of it. So our midpoint for x equals x1 plus x2 over 2. Well, we know the midpoint, that was the center value. If I drew this line, we're trying to find this one now. We're not trying to find the midpoint anymore. So we're going to have 5 equals, we know x1 is -1 plus x2. We don't know that value, over 2. Now it's just simple algebra. 5 times 2 is 10 equals -1 plus x2. And then x2 is going to equal 11. Well, that's the first value. Now we're just going to do the same thing with our y's. The midpoint of y is going to be y1 plus y2 all over 2. We're then going to put in our y value. We've got a midpoint of 4. We know y1 is going to be 2 from our point. So we have 2 plus y2 over 2. Then we're going to get 8 equals 2 plus y2. And we get y2 to be equal to 6. Therefore, our other point, our other end, so other end is always xy, so we get 11 and 6.